The heavy doors of the chair room closed with a soft sound, as if the weight of the moment had started something that would forever transform the history of the church. The atmosphere inside the room was full of silent reverence, almost palpable, as if the air itself was impregnated with expectation. In this space, where popes are chosen, the new leader of the Catholic Church is facing a monumental decision. The room, simple and austere, was impregnated with meaning, with a crucifix observing everything, symbolizing the constant presence of Christ in every moment of choice. 3 papal costumes, gold, covered and adorned with centuries of tradition, were on a velvet table waiting to be used. The scenario was grand, but for Robert Francis Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, something there didn't seem to fit. He kept standing with a quiet mind, as someone in deep dialogue with himself. In his gaze, there was no hurry. He knew the world was waiting, but he at that moment sought something more than gold and velvet clothes. Something deeper, something that was not just a representation of power, but a symbol of the true mission he was about to assume. And in the midst of all this, a small piece of clothing, simple, appeared, ready to change everything. Pope Leo XIV is sending you a special blessing to you and your whole family, asking for peace, the light and protection of Christ in every step you take. If you accept this blessing and want to share this positive energy, write Amen in the comments right now, and don't forget to enjoy and subscribe to the channel to receive more inspiring and faithful messages. May this blessing reach every heart that watched this video. When Pope Leo XIV entered the room, everyone's eyes turned to the papal costumes on the table. They were opulent, imposing, loaded with history and tradition. A true symbol of power, status, centuries of ecclesiastical authority. But surprisingly, the new pope was not seduced by that pomp. His eyes, instead of fixing themselves in the gold costumes, sought something simpler, more humble, something that resonated with his true vocation. He approached a corner of the room, and there, in an almost imperceptible shadow, was a bag of aged, simple, and seemingly insignificant. However, for Pope Leo XIV, that bag represented something deep and intimate, a connection with his origins, the simple life he had led during his mission in Peru, amid the poor and the needy. There was no gold there, no luxury, just true humility, the true essence of Christian service. This silent but decisive gesture already announced the true revolution he would bring to the church. Not power, but service. He took the bag with reverence, and inside it was the simple tunic he had used in his youth when he lived among the poor. There, at that moment, he made a radical choice, a choice that would change the course of his leadership. In the center of the tier room, the new Pope, Leo XIV, made a choice that would shock the world and redefine his pontificate. Instead of wearing the traditional gold and silk costumes, he opted for a simple white tunic, the same one he had used in the times of missionary in Peru. There were no luxurious props, no symbols of power. The gesture was simple, but loaded with a profound meaning. The church thought Leo XIV, it did not need ostentation, but of humility. He wanted to be a pope of the people, close to the needy, the marginalized, those that tradition often forgot. In making that decision, he was not just rejecting power clothes, but a value system that often made the church a distant, cold, and impersonal institution. He wanted to go back to the roots, the heart of the gospel, where service to others is the true treasure, where the greatness lies in the ability to serve and love, not in the brightness of costumes or crowns. By placing the simple tunic, Leo XIV made more than changing his clothes. He began a silent revolution, a heart and spirit revolution that would play millions around the world. And in doing so, he not only reaffirmed his faith, but also the commitment to live the gospel authentically. Looking at the simple white tunic in his hands, Leo XIV was not just watching a piece of clothing. He was remembering the life he had chosen from that silent mission in Peru, where his work was not adorned with luxuries, but marked by sweat, sacrifice, and unconditional love. The tunic seemed to have the smell of the land, the mountains, and the struggle for the poorest and most marginalized. When I dressed it, Pope Leo XIV felt a direct connection with the roots of his vocation. It was not about power or visibility. He knew that his mission was to go beyond the outer symbols, to reach the hearts, to touch the souls. The gospel of Christ was not found in material riches, but in simplicity, in service, in the welcome of the needy. Leo XIV knew that the true greatness came from the heart, not from gold or pomp. It was in humility that he was closer to Christ. And when wearing the tunic, he was making a vow, being a pope who would never forget the suffering of the poor, the pain of the marginalized, those who had no voice. This apparently simple gesture would be the foundation of his leadership, a leadership that was not based on power, but on compassion. When Leo XIV made the choice of not wearing the traditional robes of the papacy, he was not simply breaking with tradition. He was, in fact, giving a powerful message. The true tradition of the Church does not reside in the golden robes or precious jewelry, but in love, humility, and service to others. He raised his voice against an idea of church that was based on outdoor symbols of power, something that often obscured the true message of Christ. By refusing traditional robes, Leo XIV reaffirmed his view of a church that walks alongside the poor, who is not interested in grandeur, but in the true inner transformation of hearts. Tradition lives in the heart, he said with a quiet but unbreakable authority. He knew that as a pope, his role was not to rule with iron hand, but to serve with humility. His leadership was not based on what the world saw, but what he could do for others, especially the most needy. His vision of the church was radical, a church that does not seek exaltation, but which is available to the gospel and mission of Christ to love and take care of all without exception. When Pope Leo XIV looked into the mirror of the tear room, he did not see a figure of power or authority. On the contrary, he saw a simple man without adornments, without the weight of grandiose robes or gold wreaths. His gaze did not reflect the pomp of a monarch, but the humility of a servant. At that moment, the Pope was not a distant figure, an institution apart. He was just a man before Christ, ready to fulfill the mission entrusted to him. The soft smile that emerged on his lips was not of triumph, but of deep peace, a peace that only comes when one is in total harmony with the life mission. Leo XIV knew that his choice of simplicity was a powerful message to the world, but above all, it was a way of reminding the Church who was really the model to follow. Christ, who washed the disciples' feet and lived among the poor, the marginalized, the despised. This silent gesture of humility before the mirror reflected its understanding that the true power of the Church is not in gold, but in the ability to serve others with compassion and generosity. And with this simple act, he prepared to write his story, while the world eagerly awaited outside the tear room, speculating on the new pope. The atmosphere inside the room was of total silence. The sound of the bells and the screams of journalists outside were drowned out by a deep, almost reverent silence. Pope Leo XIV was not concerned with external expectation. He knew the world expected something grand, something visually impactful, but he wasn't there to impress. He was there to be faithful to the call he had felt in his heart. What the world did not know was that inside that room, he was preparing for something much more significant than any protocol event or appearance. Leo XIV did not sit before the mirror just to see. He was preparing spiritually, seeking clarity and strength to be the leader the Church really needed. Not the leader of a monarchy, but the servant of Christ. He knew that his mission was harder than any other pope had faced. It was a mission to return to simplicity, to call others to the true essence of the gospel, even if it meant breaking the conventions and expectations of a power-eating world. When the doors opened and Pope Leo XIV finally appeared before the public, what the world saw was an image that would never have expected. A simple man, dressed in a white tunic, without the pomp of traditional garments, without the golden crown, without the shine of jewelry. He walked to the counter, not with imposing steps, but with a serene calm, almost as if he was going to meet a community he knew well. The shock was immediate. The audience was expecting a show, but was received with an image of humility that silenced many of the voices that awaited a great ceremonial moment. The media, which was prepared to capture every detail of a power display, was silent. There was nothing great or pompous at that moment, but something deeply touching. Leo XIV was not there to be seen as a distant or glorified figure, but to be a living reflection of the Christ who lived among the poor without a hurry to rise. The world, who was expecting a pope in gold and shiny costumes, found a leader who, with a simple smile, showed that true greatness does not reside in what is dressed, but what is done. The impact of Pope Leo XIV's appearance was immediate and divided opinions in a way that few could imagine. For many, his choice to wear a simple tunic and reject traditional robes was a silent revolution, a gesture of deep humility that brought the true spirit of the gospel out. But for others, the gesture was seen with skepticism. The media, which was already used to the grandiose and imposing porridge of the past, was disconcerted. Some saw the act as a genuine humility, while others could not move the feeling that it was going too far, challenging tradition excessively. But for Leo XIII, the questions about form did not matter. He did not want to be an idealized figure or venerated by his clothes or theatrical gestures. What he wanted was to pave the way for a new kind of leadership, a leadership based on service and humility. For him, the true power of the church did not come from his robes or his hierarchy, but from his ability to touch the hearts of people, to serve the needy, and to live the gospel with authenticity. What the world saw or thought was no longer his concern. He was more interested in living Christ's mission deeply and genuinely. When Pope Leo XIV finally got up before the crowd and raised his hand to give his blessing, it was as if time stopped. He made no great statements, did not seek to announce his arrival with pompous words or grandiose gestures. Instead, he simply said with a calm that touched everyone's heart, "Peace be with you." These simple but powerful words reverberated through the square. The public, who perhaps expected a long speech, was touched by the simplicity and sincerity of the moment. There were no thick applause or frantic screams, but a collective emotion that seemed to unite all present. It was as if, at that moment, the Pope were not just a figure of religious authority, but someone who truly understood the pain and hopes of the people. The cameras and journalists were there to capture the moment, but the reaction that followed was something they had not anticipated. The recognition that in their simplicity, Leo XIV was doing more for the church than any great speech could have done. His gesture was not about gaining hearts with pompous words, but touching them with the purity of their faith and their example of life. The image of Pope Leo XIV wearing a simple white tunic spread quickly through the television screens and social networks around the world. The photo, captured at the exact moment he was getting up to give his blessing, became a symbol of his radically different leadership. Unlike the images of past popes, surrounded by pomp and grandiose ceremonies, Leo XIV appeared in a humility that touched everyone's heart. But the impact was not just a visual, it was emotional. Millions of people around the world saw in him a reflection of Christ, simple, accessible, and deeply human. In Trujillo, Peru, where his journey began, people were not surprised, For them, he was a man who always cared about the poorest, who was always with the marginalized. And now in the papacy, he was still that same man, who did not need golden clothes to be powerful, because his true strength came from the heart and service. In the streets of Rome, the refugee camps of Aleppo and the Manila slums, everyone felt touched by his message. Leo XIV not only shocked the world with its appearance, but revived a spirit of hope and authenticity in hearts of every corner of the planet. Shortly after his first public appearance, something unusual happened. Instead of withdrawing to the comfort of his papal rooms, Papa Leo XIV decided to leave the streets of Rome without notice, without visible security. He walked the streets of the city, not as a distant religious authority figure, but as an ordinary man in search of those who were on the fringes of society. He walked to a place where the migrants and the poor took refuge, and there he found a boy with his hand. There were no cameras, no journalists, only the Pope and the young man who did not know who was before him. Leo XIV didn't look at him from top to bottom, but approached him with a quiet smile, asking how he was. It was not a spectacle scene. It was simply a meeting of humanity. By putting his hand on the boy's shoulder and giving him his blessing, he showed the world that a pope's true mission is not to command a throne, but to serve, take care, and welcome the needy. There, in those simple and silent moments, Leo XIV reminded us of the true mission of the Church, not as an institution of power, but as a community of service and love. The simplicity of Leo XIV would soon become the central pillar of his pontificate. It was not just an aesthetic choice or a way of rejecting tradition. It was a way of teaching the world and the Church that true greatness is not found in appearance, but in action. In deciding to live without the pomp of traditional garments and without the formal ceremonies surrounding the papal position, he was challenging centuries of tradition, proposing something more authentic. He did not seek to show himself or surround himself with power. He was telling the world that the Church is not an institution that should move away from people, but one that must walk with them, especially in difficulties. His message was clear: the service to the poor, the marginalized, the suffering must be the center of any Christian leadership. Leo XIV, when making his simple choices, began to break the barriers between the Church and the people, showing that there is no external greatness to be a heart leader. He taught us that true authority comes from living the gospel in a true way, not from external symbols of power. Within the Vatican, the reaction to the behavior of Leo XIV was mixed. Some members of the Church hierarchy were stunned and even uncomfortable with their decision to reject tradition. They saw their choice as a risk to the authority of the Church, a gesture that could weaken the image of the papacy before the faithful and the world. Others, however, saw in that attitude a renewal, a chance to return to the purest principles of Christianity: humility, service, and love. Pope Leo XIV had challenged the status quo, and this generated uncertainties in some sectors, but also a vibrant hope in others. For many faithful, their posture was not a scandal, but a call to reflect on what it really means to be Christian. Leo XIV was not interested in maintaining a powerful or traditional image, but promoting the true transformation of the Church based on its deepest mission. He was challenging the Church to look inside itself, to question its own values, and to reconnect with the essence of Christ, a servant of the people, not a ruler. After the events that marked his first appearance, Papa Leo XIV wrote a letter that reverberated throughout the Church. In it, he called for all the servants of Christ, from bishops to seminarians, to abandon the desire for power and to return to the simplicity of service. He exhorted everyone not to fear losing power, for Christ never moved away from his people. The letter was a manifesto, not to change doctrines or impositions, but to remember all the true call of Christianity, to come down to serve. Leo XIV's message was clear. The Church must restore the soul, not preserve the structures, should focus on the wounds of the world and not in its own grandeur. He invited the Church to meet with the humility of Christ, to walk with those who suffer, and to be a living reflection of the gospel. His letter was quickly distributed in missions, convents, and dioceses around the world, causing an immediate reaction. In places like India and Bolivia, Pope Leo XIV's words played hearts, bringing a new sense of mission and commitment to the most needy. In writing, he was not just giving orders, he was in fact inviting everyone to start the journey with Christ in a deeper, more true way. If you also believe that true greatness is in service and humility, and that the world needs more love gestures like Pope Leo XIV's, leave a Amen in the comments. Let us spread this message of simplicity and true faith. Don't forget to enjoy this video to keep up with the channel, to keep up with stories that inspire us to be better every day. Instead, may the peace of Christ be in all of us.